especially, you know, the wisdom of the top court of the country by using language like this?
Well, in fact, let me make it very clear that the magazine is owned by Bharat Prakashan, not the RSS. It has its own independent views. Now let me come on the merit of the topic that we are discussing. Please remember, I have always maintained Supreme Court is not supreme in the scheme of things in India. It is only supreme so far as the hierarchy of the courts are concerned. And therefore, like our Prime Minister is Pradhan Sevak, the judges are also servants of the people. They are doing service to the people. They are not masters. And therefore, the colonial mindset that some of our judiciary suffers has to go away. Now, when they can open a court for hearing a terrorist case at midnight, and then on one hand, they are dismissing a petition for complete ban on the BBC documentary. On the other hand, they are hearing the other petitions. Then I have a problem because these two petitions should have been heard together. On one hand, you dismiss one side petition. On the other hand, you are hearing. I have no issue if they're hearing this petition. They can go into it and see whether what these actual are. And one of the PILs is actually asking for is to reinvestigate the matter, to look into everything, which has Supreme Court has already done it. Secondly, they want punishment for the people who are involved there. Punishments have also taken place. People from both the sides have been convicted. They are in jail. So what is this purpose, entire purpose of relooking into the matter? Now, so far as the freedom of expression and speech is concerned, Article 19.2 is very clear that they can have reasonable restriction. The action taken by the government of India is under Rule 16 of the IT rules, which gives them power. Now, this is an interim order. It is not a final order. It goes to the committee. Committee gives a finding, and then it is confirmed. That process is still not complete. And therefore, today, what we see in Supreme Court, they may hear, but they must also revive that petition suo moto on their own, where they say they will not have a complete ban on the documentary. Both these petitions should be simultaneously heard. Otherwise, it will be a one-way hearing in the court. Therefore, what I want today is that if a court can open in the midnight for a terrorist, if it can go into various other questions, please remember, for an ordinary person, if the nation is first, then comes everything. Then even for Supreme Court, nation is first, and they are there to protect the nation, and the individual rights will be subservient to national interest.
Right. Mr. Nagam, number one, I never said it is RSS own. Panch Janya is linked very well to the RSS. The editor himself admits the same. So let's not get into the fine print of it all. No, sir.
Ownership. I
never said, okay, sir. Well, because my question was linked, affiliated, not owned. I didn't say it was owned by the RSS.
It was meant for your viewers.
The organizer, okay, I got it.
It was meant for your viewers.
It's not the, Panch Janya is not the organizer, but Panch Janya is affiliated to the RSS. Now, you've made a point where you seem to suggest, and I'll bring in Tehseen on this as well, that the Supreme Court might be supreme but not infallible, so it can be questioned, and why not? But Mr. Nigam, I'm going to come back to you on one question that you've raised, where you say that the Supreme Court needs to work for India. Nobody's denying that. But a documentary on the Prime Minister, how is that anti-India? It's on the Prime Minister, sir. Even the Prime Minister is not above question in this country.
I'll answer that.
I'll come back to you. Let me bring in Tehseen into this conversation. Tehseen, the Supreme Court, supreme, not infallible. Why can't it be criticized? Everybody has a right to criticize.
Of course, everything must be criticized in this country, every single institution. That's what upholds democracy, and that includes the most honorable Supreme Court. So nobody is saying that the Supreme Court is supreme or the Parliament is supreme. It's the Vice President of India who's saying that, who hasn't read the Constitution, and he's an eminent lawyer, Chairman of Rajya Sabha. The Constitution of India is supreme. Both Parliament, Supreme Court, the Honorable Prime Minister, Chief Ministers, President draw their power from the Constitution of India. Parliament has a right to amend the Constitution, and Supreme Court has a right to strike down the amendments if it's ultra-vires to the Constitution. Power comes from the Constitution of India. First, this is the basics of democracy. It's a tragedy that in 2023 we have to explain the basics of democracy on India today. Point number two, The BJP and its supporters have a habit of running with the hare and hunting with the hound. They will criticize the Supreme Court. They will say the basic structure of the constitution can be changed. The Vice President of India, the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, they will criticize the Keshavananda Bharati judgment. But at the same time, they will quote the same Supreme Court to say the most honorable Prime Minister got a clean chit. No doubt about it, he got a clean chit. And that brings me to the question of the documentary. Nobody is questioning the clean chit that the most honorable Prime Minister got. He's got a clean chit, we respect it. But there's a documentary. Nobody would have seen it, like I've said this earlier on your show, Preeti, except that the government or somebody in the government decided to mislead the most honorable Prime Minister and go with a hammer after a documentary that would not have got traction. And what's resulted is now, everybody wants to see the documentary. Why in a democracy do you want to ban something? Why do you feel that you have to come with a heavy hammer down on something? That is not how democracy works. This is not Amrit Kal, this is Amrit Khyal. And Amrit Khyal is not good, we should have Amrit Kal.
You know, Mr. Nigam, I'll come back to you as we wait for our other panelist, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, also to join us. And I'll come back to the question that I raised earlier. You know, the documentary can be terrible, it could be unwatchable, it could be factually completely incorrect. For a matter of fact, I haven't even seen it. But, and it's not about me. The question is, it could be all of that, but it's not anti-India. So let's not pretend and make something anti-India just because it's somewhere down the line, maybe not as per facts, paint a picture of the Prime Minister, which is incorrect. Even to that extent, it doesn't make the documentary anti-India, sir. How does it make it anti-India?
Mr. Modi is a duly elected Prime Minister of this country, and therefore he's an Indian Prime Minister. Please understand that. He's not a Prime Minister of some other country. And a Supreme Court, which has given him clean chit fair and square, then you may question the Supreme Court judgment, but you cannot peddle fake news. That is
nobody's
where
questioning the judgment.
So please hold on. Let me finish.
Yes.
Let me finish.
Please.
Once, see, if there was no Supreme Court judgment, and if this documentary had come, I would not have even, raised an iota of doubt about banning or not banning. Once a Supreme Court judgment is there, you may criticize the judgment, but that is not criticizing the judgment. Please remember that documentary is giving a narrative which is anti-Supreme Court judgment. And he's an Indian Prime Minister. Therefore, it is against India. It is not, yes, that is what it is.
So somebody who's exonerated, 1 second, somebody who's till date, isn't Rajiv Gandhi somewhere down the line held for what happened in the Sikh riots? Wasn't he the Prime Minister of the country? Day in and day night, there is a section which drags in Nehru. Wasn't he the Prime Minister of the country? We have talked about ad nauseum about Indira Gandhi and the time of emergency. Wasn't she the Prime Minister of the country?
Yes,
Sir, hear me out. Sir, hear me out. The Supreme Court in the year 1986 exonerated everybody when it came down to the 84 riots. So, if we talk about Rajiv Gandhi's role, sir, please hear me out. If we talk about Rajiv Gandhi's role during the 84 riots, are we actually spinning a narrative which is anti-India because the Supreme Court exonerated everyone? No. Doesn't make it anti-India. But it's relative. One can raise the question. Go ahead, sir.
Let me answer that. Rajiv Gandhi is no more. And even if there were complaints, they all became redundant because he died. So there was no Supreme Court judgment on Rajiv Gandhi. Please understand that. That's a difference, fine legal jurisprudence difference that we have. And many people have been convicted also there. Sajjan Kumar and the others, some of them are the...
So has happened in 2002 Godhra riot. So let's not, what are we comparing? The fact is, how does criticizing the Prime Minister make it anti-India in this country?
See, because he's the Prime Minister of India.
So there have been so many Prime Ministers. We have gone ahead and criticized every Prime Minister. That's what happens in a democracy.
Criticism is all right. Emergency was not set aside by anybody. There was no Supreme Court judgment on the emergency saying it is unconstitutional. And in this case, Supreme Court has given a final judgment. These are final differences.
So it's, the irony of all of this. I want to bring in Sanjay Hegde. The irony of all of this is you're actually quoting a Supreme Court judgment on the Prime Minister and then criticizing the Supreme Court for not addressing a petition which had to do with the banning of this documentary. It's a very deep irony, sir. I hope you see it. But I'm going to just...
Both the petitions should be heard together.
Okay,
that is what my point is.
Okay, your point of view is that. I want to bring in Sanjay Hegde. Sanjay Hegde, when an editorial which comes from a magazine linked to the RSS suggests that the Supreme Court is a toolkit which is being used by anti-India forces, what does it mean in terms of the wisdom of the top court of this country?
Well, the Supreme Court is quite accustomed to all kinds of people saying all kinds of things. It is not deterred from its job. Whatever are the cases that are brought before it, the Supreme Court has to hear them. The Constitution provides not only for equality before the law, but for the equal protection of the law. Whoever these gentlemen are, they must also remember that it was the same Supreme Court that also gave Ajmal Kasab an extensive appeal. And we could tell the world that no matter how heinous a crime even an outsider commits, we do have the rule of law in place. Now, you may agree with judgments, you may disagree with judgments, but you can't classify petitioners as nationalists and therefore entitled to a different line and anti-nationals who should not be heard at all. That is utter nonsense.
All right, okay. Tehseen wants to come in quickly, Tehseen, and I'm going to cut across to Mr. Nigam then. Go ahead.
Two very quick points that we should all know. The most honorable Prime Minister is one amongst equals. He's not the king of this country. He's not the emperor of this country. He's one amongst equals. And my constitutional right, guaranteed to me by the Constitution of India, which is supreme, allows me to criticize anyone and everyone. Number two, we all respect the clean sheet that the most honorable Prime Minister got. But despite a clean sheet, if we want to be critical of anybody, including the ex-Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, who's a martyr, for example, in Bofors.
No, but he might be a martyr for you. He might not be a martyr for me or for Mr. Nigam. But everybody has a right to their opinion.
But what I'm saying is he was martyred for this country, whether you like it or you don't.
Martyr for you, maybe. There are a lot of people in this country who don't think Rajiv Gandhi is a martyr.
That's fine.
Yes.
So, and that is the right democracy gives you. You don't think somebody is a martyr. That's also a right that the Constitution gives you. The fact is that Mr. Rajiv Gandhi got a clean sheet in Bofors. The Delhi High Court came down extremely heavily on our Atal Bihari Vajpayee government and told them, you spent 400 crores on not being able to prove a case on which was an alleged corruption of 64 crores by misleading the public. They went to 4 international courts and they lost. And yet, night after night, BJP will criticize the Prime Minister who's been killed or assassinated on the Bofors issue. That time they don't think about the courts. The BJP runs with the hare and hunts with the hound. And what they're doing is extremely dangerous by being critical of the Supreme Court of India, by saying you cannot go to the courts, that's a toolkit. That is a very dangerous argument to make. It's an argument not democracies but authoritarian countries make.
You know, Mr. Nigam, I'll bring in what Mr. Hegde also said. Because, you know, to get into a territory where you're actually, you know, there's an editorial which at some line is being celebrated by saying, oh, you can open doors for terrorists. But the fact is that is what justice is supposed to do, sir, isn't it?
Preeti, I was actually, I appreciate Mr. Hegde's point of view. Reason being, he said everybody has a right to be heard. And the point that I made, on one hand, you were dismissing the petition for complete ban. On the other hand, you were listing the other side. I wanted both these sides to be heard together. That is, I think, the point which I am trying to make. We are discussing Supreme Court and the BBC documentary petitions that are there, and obviously the Panchjanya, which has made a particular statement. But the point I am making, I am not representing Panchjanya. What I am saying, a Supreme Court's duty is to hear both the sides. How can you dismiss a petition, one petition, and then say we'll hear the other one? Hear both the petitions together, club them together, hear everything out. And then you will come to a conclusion, which is a balanced conclusion, and which will appear that justice has been done to everybody. This is my point of view.
Mr. Hegde, would you want to weigh in on this, sir?
It is, to take each petition on merits. Here the question is, can the government take certain content off social media channels just because it doesn't like that? Like the content. On the other hand, is another maybe an ill-conceived petition which says that, oh, you should ban it altogether. Each action and each petition is tested on the merits. Just because one side is heard and dismissed does not mean that the other side is not valid. You have to let the courts do their work without unnecessary criticism or attributing motives. You can criticize that, okay, your choice of cases is bad. But when you start saying that you have a bent of mind, you have an agenda, that's where you've crossed the line.
You know, Mr. Nigam, that's the thing. One can't cherry pick and then try and set a narrative for the top court of the country, because what you're doing is deriding the top court of its reputation. If you're going to celebrate, the Ram Mandir verdict, the demonetization verdict, if you're going to celebrate all of that, then you've got to take this as well in stride, sir.
No, you are right. Absolutely. Therefore, I will go case by case basis. If I have to criticize Supreme Court, if I have to criticize Collegium, I will, to the best of my ability. And they must listen to it also. They are not above board. They are not above law. They are equally below the law, as we all are.
But Mr. Nigam, to say that you're opening doors to terrorists, but not banning a film or hearing that petition, if you're going to get, because we keep talking about this fake narrative that we are trying to whip up, this is as fake a narrative that you're trying to whip up, and it's dangerous for the
Preeti,
top court of the country.
Let me answer that. As I said, nobody is above the law. And
But sir, it's not a
criticism
kangaroo
will come.
court. Even the topmost terrorist in the country or the world deserves to be heard. That's what justice system is in this country.
See, what I am saying, if you can open the court at night, you can similarly hear the ban also. So what I am saying, these comparisons will always be there. Case by case basis, these comparisons will always be there. Everybody is human. Even Supreme Court justices are human. They are humans, have a tendency to err also. Therefore, I am saying, I am confining myself to this specific case, saying that both the petitions should have been heard together. That will give a idea to the people that justice has been done, and it is appearing to have been done. These two things are very important.
But sir, but the fact is, what the editorial says is something very different and could actually be a little sinister. And why I say that is because you're actually trying to mock the Supreme Court by saying that it's readily being used as a tool by anti-India forces because it didn't hear the petition, that it is funded by the taxpayers' money and it needs to work for the betterment of the country. No, sir, that's not the job of the Supreme Court.
See, that's Panchajan's view. That's Panchajan's view, which you should have a Panchajan's person out here to answer that question. But so far as I am concerned, I am very, very clear on the subject that if these two petitions were there, justice would have been done if the two petitions were heard together.
Okay, Mr. Nigam, because you took a slightly different... Okay, then I apologize because you took a very different turn in the beginning of this debate. Yeah. I understand what you're saying right now and it's acceptable. But Sanjay Hegde, by using language as this and actually injecting it into, a popular narrative, are we setting a very dangerous precedent?
Of course, it is setting a dangerous precedent, but it has not been unknown. In the 70s and all that, the leftists said equally worse things. They said that they were tools of imperialism. But irrespective of what anybody says, men and women of law who are sworn constitutionally to do justice without fear or favor will go ahead and do their job. And this equivalence between seeking a ban and quashing the ban is false, because imposing a ban is the job of the government. The court does not ban things. Now, if the government tries a ban, not by the normal route, but through circuitous routes, the challenge the court can hear. So there is a false equivalence in this entire argument.
What is the legal purview of this? Can the court actually move contempt in this case?
Well, the court has often taken...
Mr. Hegde, I've lost you. We're going to try and correct the audio line, but we're taking closing comments. I'll come back to you. Tehseen, you wanted to make a closing comment? Go ahead.
Two things. I think the court has always, to your question, can it take contempt? It can, but the court has always taken a very, very liberal view. And that is what's been outstanding about Indian courts, particularly the Indian Supreme Court. It's always taken a very, very liberal view. Therefore, the Indian Supreme Court has upheld a maxim that no matter how heinous a crime you're accused of, you will get punishment until the last mile. So even when the President of India convicts you and says you need to be hanged until death, the Supreme Court will give you one last chance, because Article 21, the right to life, is the paramount mother of all rights and liberty that has been given to us. Of all our fundamental rights, Article 21 is the most important. Now, for a court that's protecting Article 21, you have a ragtag magazine, and I say this with responsibility, coming out and comparing life to a documentary, which is not the court's job to ban, but the government's job to ban. Can you believe how intellectually bankrupt the arguments are of the present government supporters?
Okay, Mr. Nigam, final comments, sir. Go ahead.
In fact, nobody is denying the process of court, due process of court. Supreme Court has the powers and ultimately they will pass judgments. But then there are issues like judges who have made statements in public, a particular view that they have taken in public, and then sitting over and hearing the same judgments. That is the dichotomy I wish to point out. These are the issues that we have with Supreme Court. It is, and they have to, and Supreme Court, it's not that Supreme Court is also improving day by day. So this is an evolutionary process. And as the times are changing, Supreme Court is also adapting so far as the process and the law is concerned. And the short point again I will make, justice, it must appear that justice is being done. That is the important aspect of our legal jurisprudence. And that is the point that I was making.
All right, okay. But very quick comment, Mr. Hegde, I wanted to ask you that question. Can the court actually step in and take contempt of this editorial?
It can do it, but normally it doesn't. The Attorney General is the guardian of contempt. If somebody moves the Attorney General, it would be interesting to see what he says.
Well, interesting, sir. I appreciate all three gentlemen for joining us. Thank you. I'm going to leave it at that, and we leave it for our viewers to decide on what they really make of it. But ultimately, the Supreme Court, the top court of the country, are we somewhere down the line with this editorial deriding or mocking of what it's actually stood for? Leave it for our viewers to decide. A quick break to stay with us. On the other side is News Track.
Traveling from different parts.
Armed with facts,
Looking at political back.
she takes the news by its horns.
Do you think the future of these students are not hampered?
Fierce, bold and direct, setting the tone for the biggest stories from every corner and every angle. Expect nothing but the unfiltered truth.
News first, niceties later. Watch me, Nabila Jamal, on India Today.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com. Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
%33 inflation. Milk 210 Pakistan rupees per litre. Chicken 780 Pakistan rupees per kilo. Now Pakistan drops petrol bomb on its people. Fuel 272 per litre. Forex reserves critically low. Very high default risk. Pakistan economic crisis worsens. Pakistan becoming Kangalistan? Big focus on News Track.